Hello everyone and welcome to this GMP Academy live stream. My name is Aisling and I'm the GMP Academy Coordinator and I'll be your host for today's session. So we're coming today to you with an exciting live stream. It's an ad hoc session, Ask Me Anything with product managers, where our DV360 product managers will be asking all your pre-submitted and live questions on recently launched features in DV360. I'd like to thank those of you who have submitted questions before this live stream as we have received a lot of them. So before I go any further, allow me to introduce you to the two product managers who will be joining me today, Casper Verhustad and Sean Hong, both experts in the area and ready to answer your questions today. So I'd like to just go over the agenda of today's live stream. So firstly, I'll touch on the scope. Then Sean and Casper will go over the feature highlights and they'll answer your pre-submitted questions. And lastly, we'll leave some time at the end to answer your live Q&As. So the scope for today's live stream, like I've already mentioned, is recently launched features in DV360. And as you can see from this slide here, the 6 main categories that we're going to touch on today are custom bidding, outcome-based buying, conversion modeling, YouTube A/B experiments, plan to execution, and planner user roles. I must remind you that only questions which are asked under these categories will be answered. So if your question is outside of the scope, it may not be answered in today's live stream. So now I'm going to introduce you to Casper, who's going to talk about our first feature highlight, which is custom bidding.
Hi everyone, thanks Aisling for the introduction. My name is Casper Verhofstadt and I'm a product manager on Display and Video 360. I'm extremely excited to have you all here today and to allow me to talk about some of the features in my feature area. The first feature I would like to highlight is custom bidding. Custom bidding is part of the overall automated bidding suite of Display and Video 360. Let's start first with what automated bidding is. Automated bidding allows you to optimize towards a set of readily available KPIs and custom KPIs. Effectively, what Display and Video 360 does is for every incoming bid request, we predict the likelihood of that impression to lead to a desired outcome. That could be one of the readily available outcomes, such as a click, an active view, a video complete. But also we acknowledge that many of our customers have unique needs, have KPIs that are not readily available, are not as simple as just a click or a single conversion. And in order to allow you to optimize towards anything possible, we have introduced custom bidding. So another couple of things to highlight. Custom bidding allows you to do mid and upper funnel based KPIs, such as brand awareness, but also more explicit lower funnel KPIs like Roas, like return on ad spend. We've also launched recently a Google Analytics integration, allowing you to directly use custom bidding to optimize towards Google Analytics goals. And to highlight here as well, we are migrating custom bidding over so that it allows you to optimize towards the newly released Google Analytics Generation 4. Last but not least, it's worth mentioning that custom bidding is slightly more complicated than our readily available algorithms. The way that it works is that you express these custom KPIs or goals through a light Python script. So you would need to have some understanding of the Python language. Now, because of that technical limitation, custom bidding today is not really a good fit for all of our customers. So that's why we are actively working on bringing additional features on top of the custom bidding infrastructure, where actioning specific KPIs that are more commonly used, such as, for example, the Roas use case, easier for you by layering a UI on top of what is custom bidding today. So basically stepping away from the need to express goals through a Python script. So with that, I believe there are some questions that were pre-submitted that we would love to go over with you.
Great. So question 1, do Google Analytics 360 goals work for mobile applications too? Can I create a goal for app environment and optimize it with custom bidding?
That's a great question. I've hinted to this already a little in my introduction of the custom bidding feature. The current integration between DV360 custom bidding and Google Analytics is indeed, as you mentioned, with Google Analytics Classic or Universal, also known as Google Analytics 360. That is a web environment only. In order to leverage app environments, today you would need to have an integration with Firebase, so like between DV360 and Firebase, or between CM360 and Firebase. Once you have that Firebase integration, we are effectively importing the Firebase goals or the app installs, for example, as regular Floodlight activities that can be expressed already today in a custom bidding script. Now, with the future integration or migration we're doing to Google Analytics, the 4th generation, app and web are combined into a single property. Allowing that integration also allows us to directly use the custom bidding integration with Google Analytics 4 to directly express goals that are app related. So the answer to your questions in summary is yes, you can do it today through a Firebase integration, and yes, you will be able to do it tomorrow more seamlessly through the Google Analytics 4 link integration.
Great. Question 2. When I pull a conversion report for sales Floodlight revenue, DV360, CM360 sometimes give different results. Which one does custom bidding take into account for ROAS optimization?
That's a great question. So the short answer here is that whatever you see in DV360 is what you should be using. Now, the reason why sometimes these numbers are slightly different is because of the attribution scope. So where CM360 is doing attribution across all of the different campaigns you have available in Campaign Manager 360 or CM360, DV360 kind of scopes that down and filters that attribution world of CM360 to what's relevant for Display and Video 360. So when you are using custom bidding is directly linked to Display and Video 360. You should leverage the insights that you're getting from reporting in DV360. Now, it is worth noting that when you express a custom bidding script, you can express against which attribution model you would want to score impressions. So make note of the attribution model of interest to you. Make sure that you express that into the script. And then if you want to validate or verify through the reporting infrastructure of Display and Video 360, make sure that you are also using the attribution model of interest in your reporting, because otherwise, if you have a mismatch between reporting and the thing you express in your script, numbers will never end up matching.
Question 3. If I use multiple Floodlight activities in a custom bidding script, do I have to add all these floodlights into the line item as conversions? As I just add the activity I value as a hard conversion, can custom bidding optimize that line item with respect to other soft conversions in the script?
So the way that this actually works is the custom bidding infrastructure or script is completely separate from the line item conversion settings or conversion targeting settings. So this means that it's not needed for you to express a Floodlight activity that you want in your custom bidding script into the line item as well. That's not required. However, if you like to have the conversion column in the line item or insertion order or combined view pages filled with data, as well as in your offline reporting, you will have to express all of the pixels or floodlights of interest at the line item level. Now, it's worth noting that whatever you express in the line item is not going to influence the custom bidding model. It's just like at that point, it becomes a reporting nice to have kind of feature. The Floodlight activities that you want to use in optimization in custom bidding should be called out explicitly in the script.
Great. So the next question we have, when a custom bidding algorithm is assigned to a line item, does the algorithm learn only in that line item, or can other line items in the same insertion order affect the learning of the other line items?
Custom bidding scripts are managed at the advertiser level, and based on how you define the script, it scores all of the impressions available in that advertiser or within that advertiser. That means that the prediction model specific to custom bidding is actually called the P for prediction value model, value meaning like the custom value that you express based on the script. And that p-value bidding model, is trained across all of the impressions, all of the scored impressions at the advertiser level. Now, once we have the initial prediction of the likelihood of an impression leading to a certain amount of value, then we bring that prediction over to the line item, which actually has the custom bidding script enabled, or bidding algorithm enabled. And what we then do is then we use that prediction that we got from the advertiser level into computing the final bid that we submit into the auction. So the summary of this question, the answer of this question really is that we use all of the impressions across the advertiser, meaning also all of the other insertion orders for that matter, into the learnings of the bidding algorithm. But then we do nuance the bid based on the details or the information that we have at the specific line item level. And this is also why we have, like across our entire bidding suite, we have minimum data recommendations at the advertiser level for this initial prediction creation. And then we have line item level or campaign level minimums in order to make sure that we can nuance that bid specific to that line item. And generally for any machine learning problem is the more data you have, the more accurate your predictions, the more accurate your bidding ends up being.
Okay, so on to the next feature, outcome-based buying.
Great. Outcome-based buying, one of my favorites as well. So historically, Display and Video 360 has been enabling our advertisers, you, to buy on a CPM basis. CPMs are effectively impressions. On top of a CPM transaction model, we have layered our automated bidding suite to optimize towards KPIs, such as clicks, conversions, or a custom value, as we just discussed with custom bidding. Now, some of our customers don't care necessarily about impressions. They care about outcomes other than impressions. The first step we took is launching outcome-based buying pay-per-click. So we're changing the transaction model from impressions to clicks. Now, you could argue that clicks is potentially not really an outcome that many of our customers try to drive. However, the reason why we went with pay-per-click at first is because Google has a lot of experience in the pay-per-click world. We have other ad platforms that are already like exclusively on a pay-per-click model. That means that our engineering teams have all of the skill sets to build this out like rather quickly and rather accurately. So that's the reason why we first launched outcome-based buying pay-per-click. Now, what makes outcome-based buying pay-per-click unique is that it gets access to additional proprietary Google data. And because we have that additional data available into Display and Video 360, it allows us to have much more specific and nuanced prediction models that will ultimately increase your likelihood to drive your KPIs or your goals, your ROI goals. So outcome-based buying really is designed, the current integration for pay-per-click is really designed to boost the lower funnel performance activity of Display and Video 360. Now, a sneak peek very quickly, because I know one of the pre-submitted questions is actually about the second generation of outcome-based buying, which is pay-per-active view. Generally, I believe pay-per-active view is a much better fit for the typical Display and Video 360 advertiser. And that's because it doesn't limit itself to just purely clicks, but it expands the scope to also include views, specifically active views. So by the integration or releasing outcome-based buying pay-per-active view, we're able to support you with a full funnel optimization strategy. So from mid to upper funnel video impressions to lower funnel direct response impressions. So with outcome-based buying pay-per-active view, soon we will be able to cover the entire funnel, include video-based optimization, native ads, and allow you to optimize towards not just click-through conversions, but also post-view conversions, specifically post-viewable view conversions.
Okay, so the first question we have on outcome-based buying is, why can't we use outcome-based buying for native ads anymore?
So actually, native ads was never officially supported in outcome-based buying pay-per-click. We had it in a limited beta at some point in time. And the reason why we couldn't really work it out is because we've noticed that we have some challenges with correctly registering clicks for all of the native inventory. Now, given that outcome-based buying pay-per-click is charged on a click level, if there is a mismatch between registering the click in our database, then it ends up not working. It gives the wrong signals into our prediction models. So unfortunately, we had to pause the beta for pay-per-click, but luckily we managed to get it natively supported for our second generation, which is outcome-based buying pay-per-active view. So once we launch outcome-based buying pay-per-active view, which I hope that we can launch this quarter, you will be able to utilize native ads as you like using pay-per-active view.
Question 2, why can't outcome-based buying work for video?
So I kind of already hinted to this in the introduction of outcome-based buying. The current outcome-based buying infrastructure is really based on the transaction model of clicks. Now, generally, video impressions don't necessarily lead to clicks as an outcome. They are more like in a mid or upper funnel scenario to increase brand awareness, and like typical metrics that you care about are viewability or completed views, etc. So there's just not a great match between video as a format and clicks as a transaction model. Now, the good thing here is, again, like it seems that everything is on the shoulders of pay-per-active view. But with pay-per-active view, you will be able to also run video-based campaigns. So be out on the look for pay-per-active view to launch, and work with your account team to get your first video campaign started.
Question 3, compared with pay-per-click campaigns on Google Ads, where do you position outcome-based buying in DV360? Are these two competing solutions?
So I want to make this crystal clear. Outcome-based buying is not a competing solution with Google Ads or Google Display Ads more specifically. We've been really trying to build Display and Video 360 out as an enterprise platform that allows you to buy whatever inventory you want and optimizes towards your outcomes or your KPIs in the best possible way. So like my mission really is to give you best-in-class performance through a flexible and customizable bidding suite. And outcome-based buying fits that strategy or mission that I have like very, very well. Now, how I think about outcome-based buying within the scope of the Display and Video 360 is I want to give you as an advertiser options. And for some advertisers, outcome-based buying may work much better than CPM-based buying, and for others, it may not, and that's fine. We have built a infrastructure to run A/B experiments or like general experiments. So I actually encourage every single one of you to go ahead and test with outcome-based buying. See whether it works for you. If it works, great. Invest more in outcome-based buying than CPM-based buying. In the case it doesn't work for you, continue doing what you're doing today through CPM-based buying. But it is really a feature that is designed for the enterprise users in Display and Video 360 and not necessarily to compete with Google Ads. Also note that in order to build a competitive solution, if we wanted to, is that we need to make sure that we are going into the direction of like universal campaigns and combining different channels, as well as ensuring that the formats that Google Ads supports, such as responsive and dynamic ads, that's not the way that we're positioning Display and Video 360, because it's less so a enterprise solution. If you just have a like turning switch that automates everything end to end, it's not what our enterprise customers are looking for. We do, however, look at what Google Ads, like the learnings Google Ads has, and then we will use them to make sure that we are providing you as our enterprise customers the best possible feature out there.
Great. Next question. Will outcome-based buying support tag wrapping in the future?
Yes, we are working on supporting tag wrapping in the future. Specifically, we will be allowing the natively integrated auto tagging solution of Display and Video 360 to be compatible with outcome-based buying. So that means, I believe today, integral ad sciences is already supported through auto wrapping in Display and Video 360. We do have a beta to get some support for tag wrapping if it's really needed. So reach out to your account management team for more information. However, that beta will soon, similar to native ads, will be deprecated, and it will be migrating over and exclusively support the auto tag wrapping integration that exists and lives in Display and Video 360.
Question 5. When using paper active view, we achieve low viewability rates and can't set a viewability target. Then what is the value proposition of Ppav?
Yeah, so the value proposition of paper active view really is to drive better performance when it comes to, for example, a viewable CPM, or better conversions if you are layering the transaction model paper active view together with the optimization model of driving conversions. So that ultimately is really the goal. Now, it's interesting, this question, because if you are only paying for an active view impression, then all of the impressions that are not triggering that active view signal are free, essentially. So even though in your reporting you may see a lot of impressions that end up not being viewable, given that they are free, they're just like a nice to have, right? So we're not necessarily allowing you to set a viewability target, because ultimately we want to make sure that our bidding system has access to all of the impressions out there. And we make a prediction of the likelihood of the impression to being viewable. So if that prediction is, let's say, 10% versus 90%, ultimately the bid will be significantly lower for the impression that is only 10% likelihood to be viewed versus the one that is 90. But given it's still 10%, there is a likelihood that it is being viewed. It has some value, much less value, but we still want to submit that bid in the case that we end up winning the impression. So Google or Display and Video 360 is actually making that trade-off. Should I buy this impression or not? And if so, against which value? And we are taking the risk of that impression ultimately leading to that outcome. If it doesn't lead to the outcome, so in this case, the active view, bad for us, bad luck for us. If it does lead to the outcome, great. Then it triggers the charging model, but it also then gives you back that active view impression. So the summary here is, when you're paying per active view, don't look at impressions that are not viewable because you're not paying for it. So it's irrelevant.
Thanks, Casper. So that brings us to the next feature, conversion modeling.
Thanks. Conversion modeling. An area that gets a lot of interest, both here within Google as well as from the ads ecosystem and of course our customers. I'm very happy to talk about this. So conversion modeling is a way actually for us to make sure that the gap that we have in conversion attribution, which, let me elaborate on what conversion attribution is like we have a data set of impressions that we serve, so like ads that we serve to users on, for example, publishers like the New York Times of sorts. And then we have a data set on the other end with conversion events that happen on an advertiser's website, and they trigger a Floodlight activity or a Google Analytics conversion. So now we have these two data sets. And what we need to do is we need to link these two data sets. So we need to link conversion events to ad impressions. And the way that linking is actually being made is by using various user IDs. So that could be a third-party cookie, or it could be a device ID. And the moment that either through regulatory changes in the ads ecosystem, so in Europe, for example, GDPR, browsers such as Safari, or in the future even Chrome, as well as operating systems such as recently iOS 14, if they are removing the ability to get access to that user ID, it becomes impossible to link conversion events to the impression event. So that causes a conversion measurement gap. Now, what my team is responsible for doing is actually to estimate that gap And then once we have the estimation of how big that measurement gap is, we're actually doing something quite smart, if you ask me. What we will do then is look at all of the impression paths that we have, and we rank them or score them on the likelihood of them actually missing a conversion event. So what does this mean? Like, let's take one of the easy examples, which is in the case of Safari. We still have a 24-hour window where we are actually able to attribute, because we get access to the third-party cookie ID. So this means that if impressions are served less than 24 hours ago, it doesn't make sense to make them eligible for conversion attribution or conversion modeling just yet, because there's still a chance that we will end up observing the actual event. Now, once we have that ranked list of impressions or user paths, in case that we are still able to connect some impressions together, then the second or the third step, actually, so like the first step is to estimate the gap. The second step is to rank all of the impressions or impression paths on the likelihood of them missing a conversion event. And then the third step is to actually look at the unattributed pool of conversions. So again, we have this data set with conversions, and there are some conversions that are still literally attributable because they have user IDs, and there are a bunch of conversions that are not attributable. So what we then do is, based on step 1 and 2, so like the estimated gap, we will resample from the unattributed conversion pool and reallocate or reattribute them to existing impressions or impression paths. And this is a very solid infrastructure, and it has certain protections in place, such as over-modeling, which I will come to in a second. As one of the questions is, I believe, specifically about over-modeling.
Thanks, Casper. So the first question on conversion modeling is, how accurate is conversion modeling? Is it possible to report more conversions than actuals?
Yes, so it's technically not possible to report out on more conversions than actual conversion events. And this is why I'm so proud of this framework, this modeling framework, is because we leverage the unattributed pool of conversion events. Again, the way that we collect conversion events is by pixel fires or floodlight fires that happen on your site. Now, if a floodlight fires for every conversion every sale that you actually had, then the total set, the superset of conversion events is that like database of floodlight fires. And since that we are relying on this pool of floodlight fires to do the reattribution based on the gap that we estimate, it's really never possible to model more than the available unattributable conversions that we have into our database.
Question 2, is conversion modeling a future-proof solution? As new privacy changes keep coming into effect, will conversion modeling close the gap, or will it lose its function?
Yes. So one of the reasons we were a little late to the game when it came to conversion modeling is because we wanted to step away from the more traditional approach to conversion modeling, which is actually called a blow-up factor, or sort of BUF, where you simply just estimate the conversion gap you have, and then you multiply all of the observed conversions with that perceived gap. So let's make it easy for me. This is not a realistic scenario, but if you have a gap of 50%, so like we lose 50% of conversions being attributable, then what we just simply do is take all of the observed conversions and multiply them by 2 to cover for that gap. So that would not necessarily be like the most accurate type of approach. So we decided to actually rebuild an entire framework that is based on these 3 steps that I just elaborated on. So estimating the conversion gap, looking at eligible impressions for conversion reattribution, and then base that on the pool of unattributed events. That also means that principled approach is possible for any conversion gap, whether it is iOS 14, browsers such as Safari, in the future Chrome, or regulatory changes such as consent modes in GDPR or CCPA.
Question 3, can you explain how modelling works? Which data are being used for this modelling? Are you planning to provide more transparency for conversion modelling?
Yeah, so I will skip the part of how modeling works. I think we've elaborated a lot on that, but I will share a little bit on how you can get some of the transparency. So we know that for Display and Video 360, as well as Campaign Manager 360 customers, transparency and control is extremely important. And that's why, actually, as almost like a primeur in Display and Video 360 and CM 360, we allow our customers to see a world with modeled conversion, so observed plus modeled, and just observed only. And the way that you can compare these two worlds is through the attribution service in either CM360 or Display and Video 360. Let's take Display and Video 360 as an example, because it works exactly the same way in CM360. Is that you can create two new attribution models, custom models, and then you, what my recommendation would be is to create two identical models, like literally the same baseline, the same impression, viewability, measurement settings, etc. And then only change the conversion modeling setting, which is by default in an opt-in state. So like you will be opted into modeled conversions. So then you have two identical models, but the only difference being the conversion modeling setting. Then once those conversion, like you should give it some time because you need like the look back window of your campaigns, let's say like 30 days or 60 days or 90 days to get sufficient data in these attribution models. And then later on, what you can do is run a report where you keep all of the reporting settings the same and simply report one against the attribution model that has modeled conversions included and one against the attribution model that doesn't have modeled conversions included. And you can see the delta. You can slice and dice by all of the different reporting dimensions, do some validation, and get that level of transparency. Now, it's important to know that we don't recommend you to opt your primary model or system Floodlight model 0 out of modeled conversions for this experiment, because that would directly affect all of your campaigns that are currently running. So rather, we recommend keep your primary model and system Floodlight model set to include modeled conversions and just create two new custom models where you are doing this experimentation.
Question 4. Do model conversions affect auto bidding? If yes, doesn't it negatively affect it?
So we're working on releasing the integration with automated bidding, which actually is very much needed in order to close the loop, right? Like the moment that we only support modeled conversions in reporting, then the system is still not acknowledging those modeled conversions in the bidding and optimization infrastructure, which is definitely needed in order to close this loop. I'm hopeful that we can release this integration rather soon. And so the answer is like technically not yet, but soon. And then does it negatively affect it? Absolutely not. So this is what you would want to have. You want the bidding system to be fully aware of modeled conversions, since that these specific slices where there's a conversion modeling gap, such as, let's say, iOS 14 or Safari, will in the end drive conversions for your business. So you want to make sure that Display and Video 360 acknowledges that and keeps on buying those impressions on those slices to drive the ROI of your business.
Question 5. Do conversion modeling model the U variables too, or do they have null values?
Yes, I'm glad that I spent quite a bit of time like discussing how the modeling infrastructure works. Now, because we are resampling conversion events from the unattributed pool and associate them back to impressions served, the unattributed pool of conversions is fully deterministic. So it has all of the conversion metadata. It has all of the U variables populated. And by doing that reattribution, you'll be able to like report against U variables. Now, the only thing worth noting is that that resampling approach is obviously not deterministic. So even though it's very likely that that impression led to a conversion event, it's not necessarily true that it led to that exact resampled conversion event. So what you do need to take with a little bit of a grain of salt is if you start to look at conversion metadata, for example, it may not exactly match that impression. So just be wary of that. Use it more for like an aggregate understanding of how your business is doing and running.
Thanks, Casper. So on to the next feature, YouTube A/B experiments.
This one will be short and sweet, I promise. So what I want to highlight here is that we've had A/B experiments or experiments for standard CPM-based buying campaigns in display and video 360 since 2017. And recently, we have released the ability to run YouTube-specific experiments where you can compare a YouTube line item to a YouTube line item or YouTube campaign to a YouTube campaign. And this allows you to further improve your optimization or buying strategy for YouTube directly in display and video 360. The experience is extremely similar to what it is for our standard CPM-based or real-time buying types of experiments that you have been running already. So if you haven't done so yet, please go ahead and test out YouTube A/B experiments.
One on this topic. Does experiments divide the audience before a campaign starts, or does it divide as new people come up?
Yeah, great question. So the way that A/B experiments work, actually, we are leveraging mostly like third-party cookies when doing what we call diversion, is we have a hashing function on the third-party cookie ID or the device ID or basically I capture that into the user ID. So when a new impression comes in to display and video 360 and it has a user ID, then we are hashing that user ID and then we are like randomly assigning it into like arm A or arm B or A, B, and C. If you have 3-armed experiment, you can actually have up to 10 arms in an experiment, but most typical is just 2 arms. So for every incoming not bid request in this case, but for any incoming new user, we are making that diversion decision immediately when that user is offered for the first time to display and video 360 into this experiment. So this allows us to have an unbiased approach across the entire experiment and continuously. If a user comes back, the user ID is again hashed. The hash output is exactly the same as in the first instance because it's the same user ID and will be like again put into the same arm of the experiment.
Great. Question 2. Do simultaneous experiments affect each other?
No, you can run multiple experiments at the same time. And the reason why they don't affect each other is because every experiment has its own hashing function. So user 1 can be in arm A for experiment 1, and user 1 can be in arm B for experiment 2. So like what happens is that because it's purely a random assignment based on the experiment ID, effectively, we're like control and exposed in the second or third or like subsequent experiment is equally affected. And with that, we cancel out the impact of experiment 1 on experiment 2 and so forth.
Great. Question 3, it's a long one. You recommend to set up separate brand lift studies for test and control arms. Doesn't this result in different baselines for the 2 arms and create inequality? What do you think about using single BLS for the whole experiment and compare the control and test performance at LI breakdown in the BLS report?
Yeah, great question. Actually, we support both. The recommendation, however, is to run independent brand lift studies. And the main reason for this is that if you run 2 independent brand lift studies, you get double the responses. So like you have, I don't know exactly what the number of responses is. I thought 3,600. So you get 3,600 responses for brand lift study 1 and 3,600 for brand lift study 2, which gives us a better and more accurate signal so that we can actually compare the difference. Because if you run an A/B experiment over 2 brand lift studies, we need to, quote unquote, statistically power the difference So the more signal we're getting, the better and easier it is to get to statistically significant results. So that's why we have that recommendation. If you combine 2 insertion orders into the same brand lift study, then you're limited to only 3,600, so 1,800 responses per line item or per insertion order, depending on your setup, which is obviously affecting the ability for us to detect that difference and to power that difference. So like both are supported, but we strongly recommend you to create a separate brand lift study for each arm. Now it's worth noting that you have to make sure that the brand lift study is exactly configured the same, because like if brand lift study 1 is measuring something else than brand lift study 2, then it doesn't really make any sense to compare the outcomes. So make sure that in the case that you're setting up separate brand lift studies for each arm, that they are exactly the same.
Okay, great. Thank you, Casper, for all those in-depth answers. They were brilliant. I'll now introduce everyone to Sean, who's going to talk us through plan to execution.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Hong. I'm a product manager at Display and Video 360, and I work on our planning and forecasting products. And those involve any products within Display and Video 360 that helps our customers use our forecasting technologies to plan ahead and discover inventory before the campaigns actually go live. Today, I'm going to talk about a few recently launched features for our Plan Workspace. And before I get into the specific features, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about our Plan Workspace. I think of our Plan Workspace as a sandbox for our customers to try out different inventory, try out what the campaign is going to look like if it eventually ends up running. And we do that by providing our customers with a people-based reach forecast that tells our customers how many people the campaign is expected to reach if it were to actually run. And within that, there are two features that we recently launched that I will go over today. First of those feature is our plan to execution. One thing that we've heard from our customer is that it is important for there to be closer connection between planning and execution or buying. And plan to execution does that exactly. What it allows our customers to do is to first plan for their campaign and generate forecasts, really see what the campaign is going to look like and how it's going to perform. And if they come up with a satisfactory plan, they can, through click of a button, generate insertion orders and line items directly from it without having to recreate all of these, manually one by one. And we believe the benefits are twofold. One, we believe that it facilitates better collaboration between the media planning teams, who are the primary users of our planning workspace, and the programmatic teams, who are the ones that are responsible for executing and creating these buying objects. And for the execution teams, we believe the benefit is that it creates efficiency for creating a new campaign, because you don't have to create everything from scratch, and you can just generate a campaign from a plan that you generated and that you know how it's going to perform. Next, please. Next feature I want to talk about is our planner user role. Ever since we launched our Plan Workspace in 2019, one feedback that we've gotten a lot is a need for there to be better way for the media planning teams to access the planning tool. And the concern that we've heard is that while it is important for the media planning teams to have access to all of the planning capabilities within Display and Video 360, there were some risks associated to affecting live campaign objects that are running or that are about to run. So we needed a way to give planners safe access to the Display and Video 360 that makes the programmatic teams feel comfortable. So we created two set of planner user roles that have varying access to Display and Video 360, but both of those roles have full access to our Plan Workspace and some of the other planning capabilities like Marketplace. And they can do everything in planning, but they do not have full access to buying objects like campaigns and installation orders, meaning that they can not affect in-flight campaigns. And really the benefit, as I mentioned earlier, is that it allows media planning teams access to DV360 for planning purposes only, so that media planning teams gain access to what they need, and programmatic teams don't have to worry about live objects being affected by the planning teams. And now I'll go through some of the pre-submitted questions that came through.
Great, thanks, Sean. So the first question under this area is reach forecasting cookieless? When 3P cookies are gone, can you still provide accurate forecasts?
Yeah, this is actually a really great question, and also a really timely question, as I'm sure most of you are thinking about recent announcement by Chrome and how things are going to change in the new environment. And we are also thinking very hard about this in planning and forecasting team. And at a high level, what we are looking to do is to make sure our reach forecasting tool is resilient to cookie deprecation and all these changes that are happening in the ecosystem, and make sure our customers continue to have products that serve the purpose. And what this means is that we will need to adapt to the changing environment and look into different signals that we can use to generate forecasts, so that our customers continue to get valid forecasts in the new environment. And when it comes to our Plan Workspace reach forecasting tool, our goal is to continue to provide our customers with people-based forecasts, so you can continue to have trust and know that using our tool, you can get accurate forecasts of how many people, not cookies, that you can reach using your campaign.
Great. Question 2. How accurate do you find your search forecast, your reach forecasts? What should we do to make better forecasts? Any tips?
Yeah, I think I answered some of this from earlier question, but to answer, I guess, three questions actually one by one. So personally, I do believe our forecasts are very accurate, and accuracy is very important for any forecasting product, as it relates to trust, and it relates to really how valuable the forecasting product is. And what we do internally is that we have we check on a regular basis how accurate our forecasts are, and if the forecasts are either approaching our quality bar or our accuracy bar, then we look into ways to improve the model or improve other ways of making sure forecasts are more accurate. And what we do with also new feature launches, we make sure new feature launches also meet our accuracy bar and make sure they don't affect accuracy of our existing features as well. In terms of what you can do to make forecasts more accurate, I think big part of it is our forecasts are really only as accurate as the settings on our planning tool itself. So one big tip is to make sure all the settings that you typically use on your campaigns are set on the plan, so that we take that into account when we generate forecasts. For example, if you only buy impressions over 70% viewability, make sure that is set on the Plan Workspace. If you only buy from certain exchanges, make sure that is also taken into account, so that our forecasting system takes into account the right set of settings that you typically use to buy campaigns.
Great. Question 3. Will PMP deals be included in reach forecasts together with open auction?
Yes. So supporting PMP deals, or deals in general, is a big project that is under active development right now. So short answer is that we hope to have some update for you in the near future on when you can actually have the feature available to you. But I think more broadly, coverage is a big part of our planning tools investment area. And that's important to us because we want to make sure our customers are able to plan and see forecasts for everything they can buy on DV360. And obviously, deals is a big part of capabilities of the Display and Video 360. So we are investing heavily to make sure that in the near future, our customers can not only plan for open auction and YouTube, but also deals as well.
Great, thank you for that, Sean. So that brings us to the live Q&A, and I think all the questions asked in the live Q&A have already been answered. Am I right in saying that, Sean and Casper? I might just bring the two of you back on the screen.
Yeah, I think quite some questions were already answered in some way or form. I think I can pick out like two to briefly talk through. So like one on outcome-based buying, someone asked if tracking through Campaign Manager 360, would you still have to pay for ad serving costs on ads that don't reach the outcome that you are paying for in Display and Video 360? So the answer to this question is yes, because you're actually paying CM 360 or Campaign Manager 360 for the measurement of the impressions that are being served. Now, if you don't want to pay for impressions that don't result in the outcome that you care about, the best approach, but you do lose some tracking ability in Campaign Manager, is to traffic the creatives directly into Display and Video 360. So you get a DV360 trafficked creative. So that's the solution there. It's a trade-off that you have to decide on your end. Not necessarily a recommendation from our side. The second question that wasn't really answered from my side is on Google Analytics. So will custom bidding using Google Analytics goals ever look at post-impression data? So basically, I assume that what's meant here is acknowledge view-through conversions, or will it only be post-click interactions? And the answer here is that Google Analytics as a measurement system focuses on last click only, or on post click only, and they have their own set of attribution models. And what we are doing is we're taking Google Analytics as the source of truth here. That means that view-through conversions are out of scope for the integration between Google Analytics and DV360 / custom bidding. Now, if you don't get enough post-click conversion events for a single Google Analytics goal, then what you can do is actually combine multiple Google Analytics goals into one single script. So you get, in that sense, into the weighted conversions use case. So assuming that you have product page landing and you associate it with a value of 1, and then you have adding product to cart measured in Google Analytics, you add a value of 2, and then you have the final sale with a value of 3. So now you are able to actually combine these 3 Google Analytics goals into that single script, which will allow you to get more impressions positively scored, which makes your script eligible for bidding. So there are ways to work around this. If that wasn't fully clear, I suggest you to reach out to your account team and work with a GTech, a Google Tech specialist to figure out how to make Google Analytics goal optimization work through custom bidding for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Casper, for answering those live questions. That is all we have time for today. Sadly, that has brought us to the end of our live stream. I'd like to thank all of you for joining today, and everyone who submitted a question, thank you. And a big thank you to our 2 product managers for all of their amazing answers. I hope to see you at some future GMP Academy live streams, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everyone.